Gentlemen, my guests today are two individuals who I think it's fair to say, guys, and feel free to hype yourselves up, gentlemen. You guys have to be in the Mount Rushmore of DEA agents and people in the spotlight in your craft. Mr. Steve Murphy and Javier Pena, the goat of goats when it comes to DEA agents, took down Escobar. They're they're I'm speechless, guys, because I'm such a big fan. I feel like I know you guys, which is the craziest part, I guess, with technology and social media and all these documentaries I've seen. Stephen Murphy, Javier Pena, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me.
Nick, thanks for having us on the show. And you know what? You're good for our egos. Thanks very much.
I do what I can to make my guests feel comfortable and happy and excited.
Nick, I love that. Yeah, I love that Mount Rushmore, man. Hey, put it up there. Yeah.
Listen, I've always been, so I like to give my audience interesting. It's something I was telling you gentlemen beforehand, and I've always been fascinated by the Pablo Escobar, his claim to fame, how he's spoken about in hip hop music, and there's movies made of him, and there's the Robin Hood factor. And I mean, you guys have seen it all. I don't think anyone can tell the story better than you two individuals. I want to just start off with the Narcos series. It's one that I've watched 4 times over. Steve, you have that fantastic poster in the background as well, and you guys have the shirts on too. How much influence did you two in particular, and Javier, I'll start with you, did you have on this series as a whole?
Well, you know what, on the series, and I'm gonna go back to Steve here because he can explain a little bit better. But we were hired as consultants, Nick, to tell them the true story of Pablo Escobar. And remember, we're not movie people, we're not TV people. We had just retired. In our idea, because we've done documentaries, and documentaries want to know the real truth. So when we go up there, we met with the writers and we talked to them. We told them the real true life story because, Steve and I lived it. We were there during the Pablo Escobar chase. And then all of a sudden, we started seeing the scripts come back. Says, man, that's not exactly what we told them. What's going on? And I'll be honest, then when the series comes out, wow, it was like, I told Steve, I called him up and said, man, no one's going to watch this. This is a bunch of BS. You know what I'm talking about? And all of a sudden, after a while, man, it was a world type viewing that people all over the world were watching it. It's something we didn't expect. It was a 360, you know what I'm saying? Where people were like just hooked on the series. The ratings were way up, and it's something we didn't expect. And it's entertaining. It's we hadn't learned about what is it called, the artistic licenses in Hollywood, and that makes your show. It's a great show, but when it first came out, see, I was expecting difference because we had never done a TV show. So, but I'll let Steve can explain it a little bit better.
Yeah. And just to give you an idea, we were approached by 2 producers through a mutual friend of mine here in DC. And I went and met with them. But you know what? They both had personal agendas. They wanted to take our story, and one guy wanted to make a political statement out of it. And, that's not what this was all about. So we turned them both down. And when we got a call from Eric Newman, who's the creator of Narcos, I turned him down on the phone, and I'm pretty sure he probably fell out of his chair when I said no. But make a real long story short, he flew to DC with 2 writers. I had dinner with them, and Javier and I were in direct communication with each other through the whole thing. And our personalities clicked with Eric and the crew, and I started busting their chops as soon as I got to the restaurant, and they had a good sense of humor. And it just kind of all fell into place. And so at the end of the evening, Eric said, well, what are you going to do now? And I said, well, I'll talk to Javier, but I'm going to recommend that we move forward with you guys and see what's going to happen. And he said, okay. He said, listen, before we leave, he said, why are you guys so hesitant to tell your story? And we said, Eric, the last thing we want to happen is that anybody would ever glorify a mass murderer, a narco terrorist like Pablo Escobar. And he promised us that night. He said, I promise you, we will not do that with this series. And in our opinion, he's lived up to his word. So we're real happy working with Eric.
It's fascinating that you mentioned that, because I grew up in Queens and New York City, and I like to tell people that are not from New York City, friends that I've met with some of the traveling that I've done, and I went away to school in Buffalo. I went to Buffalo State, and even Buffalo State, gentlemen, even though it's New York State, it's completely different, Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to tell people that New York City itself could be its own country, because it's not like this anywhere else in the United States. And the reason why I bring that up is I had a lot of Colombian friends, and even some family members, married people that are Colombian too. I'm Greek is my background. And man, it's unbelievable the conflicting reports you hear about a guy like Pablo Escobar, because you have people that think the Robin Hood thing with him, where he fed the poor, and some of his sicarios that I feel like that's part of my vocabulary now. I've heard that so many times over the years.
Yep.
It's guys that they looked up to him as like a godlike figure, but then on the flip side, you see all the craziness that he's done. And Javier and Steve, you two gentlemen actually saw it firsthand. So I love that you mentioned that to him, Steve. What was his feedback on that?
Well, I mean, they lived up to their word. So, and there was, you know, when it came to reviewing our contracts, we hesitated because, and it turns out, we're learning as we go here. We're not movie people or TV people. We're cops. So we were learning as we go, and there was a clause in our contract that said that, and we didn't know this was Netflix at the time, that the owner of our contract could transfer the show over to another producer. Well, there's one producer in particular, I won't mention names, in Hollywood, that we would never want to work with, and we would not want him to have access to this story. And that caused about a week delay on getting the contracts approved. And Eric called me. He's like, what's going on with you guys? Why are you not signing? What's the problem here? And I explained it to him, and even he laughed about it. He says, listen, none of us producers, the good producers in Hollywood, want to work with this guy either. So I promise you, we're not going to, it will not be sold to him, and it has not been. But they were great to work with. I was telling you about the literary licensing that's included in our contracts. That, they can change our stories. That's just a fancy way of saying they can lie about what really happened. But the truth is, it came out with a great action series. Nobody wanted to show us sitting in the embassy writing reports all day and going to boring meetings. And, that's the stuff that you just have to put up with. So we're real happy with the way Narcos came out.
Javier, how about yourself? How'd you feel about that whole conflict between not having him be polarized, Pablo Escobar, that is, as this hero, where really he was a villain and a narco terrorist, like you guys have mentioned?
And Nick, you bring up a good point right now. That's one of the things we hear all over the world, that Robin Hood aura about Pablo Escobar. And you know what? You had it right, Nick. Pablo Escobar, like you said, the thugs, the sicarios loved him. And you know what? I tell the story when this is real life. I helped arrest one of those young sicarios, 15 years old at the time. And I remember when he confessed to us, he told me that he loved Pablo Escobar, that he was willing to die and kill for Pablo Escobar. Then I started asking him more, and he said, "You know what? He's given me money where I can take my mother out of poverty. She's got a house now. She's got food on the table. We have a little bit of money, and it's all because of Pablo Escobar." So, and he said, "You know what? I'll be dead by 23 years old." He was 15 years old at the time, and then he confessed to me that he had already killed 10 police officers. When Pablo Escobar started the war in Colombia, he put bounties on cops. police officers. And Nick, you know how much he was paying per dead officer was $100 a head. Ain't that pathetic? Something you've never heard of. $100 for a human life, and this young thug, admitted to 10 police officers. He said, "Yeah, it's $100 a head, but I love and I will kill for Pablo Escobar." And you talk about the way he would recruit this thugs, sicarios. He would go to the poverty areas in Medellin, and there was a place called, we always heard about it on the radio, meeting at La Terraza. Wow, we never knew. La Terraza, you know what it was? It was one of the oldest Catholic churches in the poverty area of Medellin, and had a terrace around it. So Pablo would go, and all this thugs knew he was coming. So when Pablo, that charismatic attitude he had, hug him, kiss him, and all of a sudden, all this thugs say, "Pablo, who do you want me to kill, man?" He gave him money, but in return, he wanted people killed, and this thugs would volunteer and have no conscience about it. So there was that. We always say we don't agree Pablo Escobar was not a Robin Hood. Did Robin Hood put a bomb on a commercial airline? Did Robin Hood kill an ex-president of Colombia? Did Robin Hood kill thousands and thousands of innocent people? Of course not. So we try to discredit that myth, but it's out there, and you hit it right on the head. There's movies, there's songs. We see, right, Steve? We go to shows sometimes. People wear their Pablo Escobar shirts. The image of him. So it's something that we try to portray that to the writers at Netflix, and it's a great series. Like you said, it's that licenses, and if you've seen my character, man, I'm doing all sorts of stuff. And when we do our Europe presentations, right? I mean, we go all over the world. Everybody thinks I'm a dirty agent. I said, if I was dirty, guys, I'd be getting out of prison right about now if I done all the things they claim to be. So it's an entertaining series. There is fact to it. The chronology is accurate. That make no mistake about the series. But however, there's artistic licenses.
For sure. And also, anytime you try to make a series, I have a buddy of mine who's a director. You have to bring some form of entertainment too, because like you said, Steve, for as fascinating as your careers were, I don't know if an entire series of you being in an office the whole time would make it the big explosion that was the Narcos series on Netflix.
No, and so we have this speaking business too. This is our 5th year. Of course, COVID has really shut us down, but for the first 4 years, we averaged 75 appearances per year around the world, and the whole purpose of doing this, and as well as our book, is to tell the truth. That we want the world to know what really happened. Love Narcos, love Eric Newman and all the writers, everybody we worked with, producers. But same token, we want the world to know the truth about this. And it's nice. We go places and people say, "Hey, you guys are true American heroes." We don't subscribe to that. We don't feel like heroes. We were a couple of professional law enforcement officers that got to work a really big law enforcement case. We knew that would be a case of a lifetime, but that doesn't make you a hero for doing your job. And the one point we were going to get across to the world, and I'm probably jumping the gun a little bit here, but we hope to reiterate this throughout the interview, is the true heroes in this whole thing are the Colombian National Police, because they took their country back. Narcos shows that I was on the roof when Pablo was killed. I wasn't there. I was back at the base. So this is a straight out Colombian National Police operation. And that's why we bring it up, because those are the true heroes.
Wow, that's interesting. But there's the picture of you over his body. You showed up after the fact.
Right. I actually rode out to the scene. I was in Colonel Martinez's office as the operation was going down, and I was listening on the radio, as Colonel Martinez is giving orders on what to do. And then it got real quiet there for a couple of minutes. And of course, we now know that's when the gun battle was raging there. And then one of the majors that we worked with came up on the radio and says, "Viva Colombia, Pablo is dead." Well, while this was going on, the colonel had already authorized to get the troops together. We're heading out there. Well, when he says get the troops together, that's 600 armed people we got to get together. You know, you got to issue weapons. You got to have roll call, make sure you got everybody, issue assignments, get the vehicles out. That doesn't happen in just a few minutes. So, you know, by the time we were loading people up, the gun battle was over. But I rode out to the scene with Colonel Martinez, and it just so happened that I had the only camera that worked during that time. So
Wow.
all the photographs from there, you know, Javier and I own those. And it's, well, kind of led to our speaking business, and we're talking to Nick Dice today. So it doesn't get any better than that, right?
Yeah. Listen, that's a win-win for me as well. Javier, I want to go back to something that you said really, really interesting about those young sicarios. Man, I don't know if this is going to come off wrong, but isn't that the perfect type of individual to target if you were Pablo Escobar? Like a young kid coming from poverty, you give them this new, I don't even want to say lavish lifestyle, but compared to, you know, getting a kid out of the slums of Medellin and, you know, here's a couple of hundreds or thousands of dollars, and before you know it, you're taking your mom and your dad to filet mignon dinners. Like, isn't that the ideal person you should go after if you were a guy like Escobar?
You know, Nick, that's a great point you made. And yes, you are 100% correct. And remember, you know, the Pablo Escobar reputation, everybody in Medellin knew who Pablo Escobar was. So, you know, and this, like you said, this young kids, thugs, I call them, you know, 'cause I mean, they idolized Pablo Escobar, but it was the perfect person to recruit because the comunas of Medellin, I know you have some, you know, Colombian listeners out there. The barrios, the comunas, you know what, and you know, and I don't know how the word Sicario, I mean, it goes back, right, to, you know, Greek, you know, assassins. And then there's been movies made. I remember there was one, La Virgen de los Sicarios, the Virgin of the Sicarios, right? But growing up poor, in poverty, and at this time, Medellin was wild, wild west. Remember, there was a lot of other gangs out there, drug gangs. So it was common to start killing people. There's a famous lady from Medellin, Griselda Blanco. I'm sure you know a lot of people have heard about her. Worked in Miami, just as ruthless as some of those guys, even more ruthless. So she herself had killed a lot of people, but you know their favorite way of killing people, and one of the favorite ways of killing people in Medellin was two guys in a motorcycle, right? The guy in the back would shoot, weave in and out of traffic, you'd be gone. They would never get caught. So these young thugs would volunteer, and as I mentioned, I mean, wow, we've had many experiences where Pablo himself would recruit them, and they were in love with Pablo Escobar. They wanted to do whatever the boss asked them to do, and remember, man, that's what better bragging rights can you get, right? Hey, I work for the boss. Who? Pablo Escobar. Oh man, hey, we gotta leave him alone. And which reminds me, and I gotta tell you a funny anecdote. When we seized one of Pablo Escobar's cars, but it belonged to the sister. So when we took it, and I noticed, I said, "What's that on the dashboard?" It was a piece of paper, and a great piece of paper. The note said, "This is Pablo Escobar. This car belongs to my sister," and he mentioned her name on it. He said, "If you're thinking of stealing it, do not. Remember, this is Pablo Escobar." Hey, what better insurance is that, right? Who would want to steal that car? But anyway, but yeah, going back to it was a perfect young thugs to go after, and they were vulnerable. They always heard of Pablo Escobar, so now they have bragging rights. They have lavish. They have money, and like you said, the comunas were very poverty-stricken areas in Medellin, and so it was perfect grounds to recruit these people.
I have here in some of my notes from hearing you guys throughout the years in all these documentaries I've watched that during this Escobar era, highest murder rate in the whole world was in Colombia. Was that the case, Steve?
92 and 93, Medellin, Colombia was was the murder capital of the entire world.
How so what drives you two to want to go down there? Was it did they come with this offer? I like how you're laughing already. Because Steve, also, like Javier, you're Hispanic, right?
Right. Yes, I am.
So, Steve, you're white like I am. You kind of stick out like a sore thumb over there. So,
I'm English Irish. You don't get any whiter.
so what drove you to want to go down there? Did you think in the back of your mind that this would be such a gigantic case, or was this just, this hit my desk, I got to go to work?
Well, I'll go first. Mine's a little different. I did not want to go to Colombia. I had volunteered for Mexico. I wanted to, in DEA, when you come on, you got to do 4 years domestic. So I did my 4 years in Austin, Texas, which is a great place. It's the music capital of the world at that time. And I wanted to go see the major leaguers, right? The major league traffickers. So I put in for Mexico, and they made a mistake. And so my boss says, Javier, did you put in for Colombia? I said, no, sir. I put in for Mexico. He says, well, you got selected for Colombia. He said, you want to fight it? You want to try to, get out of it because you have a legit. I said, nah, you know what? Let me go check the map where Colombia is. So that's how I ended up in going to Colombia. Mine was by mistake. And then when I get there, one of the bosses who knew me from Texas had now been assigned to Colombia, a guy by the name of Joe Top. So he knew my work ethic. We were workers, and he said, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to assign you the Pablo Escobar case." The senior agent who was working it was getting ready to leave Colombia, so there had to be a transition. So that was my world into Pablo Escobar.
And for me, I'll be real honest with you. We were in Miami, and my wife and I grew up in Tennessee and West Virginia. She's from West Virginia, so we're small town country people. And after 4 years in Miami, I had a partner shot in 1989, and the informant was killed in a deal that had gone bad. But my wife was a registered nurse, and she always liked the really action areas of the hospital, the emergency room and the trauma centers, and the ICU and things like that. And she came to me after about 3 years. She said, it's been really exciting here. What's the next most exciting thing we could do? Well, I was working a case with our office out of Barranquilla, and I said, we could go to Bogota, Colombia. And she's like, I know she looked at me like I had three eyes, but, she thought about it, and she came back to me, and I introduced her to one of the agents who was up TDY in Miami, and we had dinner with him, and she grilled him for about 3 hours at dinner. And she came to me a couple of weeks later, and she said, "Are you still interested?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." She said, "If we're going to do it, let's do it while we're young." So I actually put in for Barranquilla, was selected to go there. And then they needed a Spanish speaking agent right away. And I had to go to language school. So they rescinded my transfer. Then I put in for Bogota. I got that. And that's how we ended up there. And, going there, I didn't know Javier. I didn't know his partner at the time, Gary Sheridan. And you don't know what cases you're going to be assigned to when you get there. You get there and you get to know everybody in the office, and they see where you fit in and maybe who you click with. And I clicked with Javier and Gary, and that's how I got assigned to the Medellin cartel case. Of course, then Gary got promoted, and he moved to Barranquilla out of Bogota. So that left Javier and I working together.
Oh, wow. So you answered my follow-up question. You two didn't know each other until then.
No, and we're mind readers, so we know what's on your mind there, Nick.
Yeah. Listen, you guys are professionals. You guys do this all the time. So I got to ask you guys about this Popeye individual. This guy, I have his name here. Where is it? John Yairo Velazquez. He was the big hitman for Pablo. He was like a YouTube sensation recently as well. He had over 1 million followers. I was reading somewhere, Javier, that if you went to Colombia, and the guy was free at this point. This is just recently, a couple of years ago. You can pose with him having a gun to your head for like $250. It was like the things people do. And look, I know I'm a millennial and I come from this era of social media, but man, some of the things people do for the likes and the clicks is unbelievable. And Javier, tell me a little bit about this Popeye guy. What's over
Yeah,
3,000 murders he confessed to?
right.
He committed 250 of them. I watched the documentary Drug Lords, and Steve, your face there when you're talking about him, you're just like, he was a mass murderer, and you're kind of saying it. I wouldn't say laughing, but you're like, guys, don't idolize this dude. This guy was a villain in every sense of the word.
You know what, Nick? You hit it right on the head. You know, they've tried to get us on stage with him. They tried to get us to talk with him. There's been a couple of documentaries, and we told the producers. I remember the one of them. It was a Canadian company, great guys. They did a great show, great documentary. But they said, "Hey, we got a hold of Popeye, and we want you all to talk to him." He said, "We will never." Understand, never talk to Popeye. We will never get on the same stage with him anywhere nearby. This guy's a mass murderer. He's admitted to killing lots of people. He's killed police officers. And remember, we lost a lot of friends there, Nick.
Mm.
Steve and I had a lot of police officer friends that were killed by Pablo Escobar. I told a story where we went to a funeral at the church. We had eight coffins of police officers. The main guy was a good friend of mine, killed by Pablo Escobar. And when I say killed by Pablo Escobar, under the orders of Pablo Escobar, so I'm sure
Right.
Popeye was involved because Popeye has admitted to killing tons of people. I think he puts a number at 300 or something that he himself helped kill. You know what, Steve and I, we came up with a number, and based on all the what is it, the terrorism, you know, all the people killed. We put the number killed by Pablo Escobar at between, I mean, roughly it's anywhere from 12 to 15,000. That's conservative. Innocent people killed by Pablo Escobar. If you count the car bombs, the assassinations, the bounties, the buildings, the newspaper editors, the commercial airline people killed by Escobar. Anyway, so Popeye claims that the number is closer to 50,000 people. Can you imagine? And this is from a first-hand Sicario. Popeye, we were after him. When Pablo Escobar surrendered, you know, Pablo picked about 7 Sicarios. One of them was a guy named Popeye, John Jairo Velazquez Vasquez. Uh, After Pablo escapes from the prison, we find tons of photos of Popeye. He used to dress as a woman inside the prison parties. We've got, I mean, you know, he's at the bar. Pablo Escobar, I don't know if you knew, Nick, but he had a little bar, you know, a drinking bar, right,
Mm-hmm.
at the prison, where they would, you know, I mean, entertain, you know, the parties. But anyway, and I am surprised because once Popeye got released, and I think he did about 20, 22 years in jail, somewhere in there. Anyway, once he got released, I was like, man, someone's going to kill this guy. He survived, and I think, you know, and you know, he just died, right? About
Yeah.
months ago with stomach cancer. But yeah, he was charging people. I mean, we've heard stories from the documentary people that he was charging. It was just a lot of money he would charge, but people were paying him. And civilians go to Medellin, they would take their picture. They you know, just to talk to them. And we've talked to friends in the documentary business who have talked to Popeye, and they say this guy's out of control. He's crazy, you know, just charging and just kind of out there until, like I said, he recently died of stomach cancer.
Yeah, Steve, even when you hear him talk in some of these, he's just like, yeah, you know, I killed this many people, just like, you know, I would just run up behind them and shoot them. And he's just telling you this like you're telling me before we started recording, like how your day was going. You know, it's just his energy was so, it was captivating the way he was, because I was on the edge of my seat listening to this, but in the back of my mind, I was just like, why am I attached to him telling me this?
Right. Right. I mean, he was a psychopath by every sense of the word. You know, one thing that really got to me is, I mean, these guys, they killed cops left and right. I think there's over 1,000 Colombian police officers were killed during this Escobar reign. Well, Popeye, when he comes out, he has a tattoo, El Jefe de Mafia, the mafia boss. And I saw pictures on the internet of him posing with young Colombian police officers. He's got his arm around them and he's holding up his tattoo so you can read, that he was a criminal. And these young cops don't realize who they're taking a picture with, that he killed all their brother officers years and years ago. So, it's this, I don't want to call it an adoration, but a fantasy of these guys. And even at my age, I'm still interested. I'm reading books now about the Mexican mafia and just different things that are going on in the world. I'm not by any means idolizing these guys. You just want to learn more about them, to kind of figure out how you can combat them. But it's just amazing, the popularity. And that's what made Narcos so popular, because people were just enamored with knowing more about Pablo Escobar. I don't understand it, but, I'm kind of happy because, again, we're talking with you. We get to travel around the world. We've been involved in a lot of projects that we never would have been if we weren't involved in this case.
Javier, you mentioned the prison in passing, and Steve, this wasn't really a prison, was it? Like, this seemed like he had a king-size bed. He had his own pool. Was it a slap in the face to you two and the DEA and the Colombian police that were going after him to him say, all right, I surrender, but these are the circumstances?
Right. And let me just preface it with the surrender was one of the we just did not believe the conditions, and when the government of Colombia accepted that, it was a slap in the face to everybody, to the world, not only to us, but what about all the people that he killed? The victims of the Avianca airline. Basically, the surrender was 5 years in his prison that he was going to build, and he paid for it. He hired his own guards, took his own sicarios with him, and nobody could come and visit him, right? So when we knew it was a farce, of course we did. But then, Nick, if you look at the other side of the coin, remember the terrorism war was one of the worst we had ever seen. The innocent people. It was a daily basis of killings, of bombings, of like I said, buildings, assassinations. It was a daily occurrence. So when he told Colombia, I'm going to surrender and I'm going to stop my bombing campaign. If you're the president, what would you do? Right? I mean, you're trying to save lives. So there's two sides to the coin. We didn't like it. The other side of that coin was that if we let him surrender, it's going to stop. Yep, and it did stop. However, after his escape, when we went in, I remember the very next day it was like, what? What? This is no prison. Yeah, it was a country club setting. He had his own apartment, kitchen. He had cooks. He had. There was no cells. It was just like Pablo Escobar's. It was a penthouse apartment. His view was the city of Medellin. It was a beautiful view. And then the back, he had the soccer field where we found out that, professional soccer teams would come in and play with him. Like I said, he had a bar, drinking, parties, all this fancy clothes, all this women's negligee type stuff inside the prison for all the parties. So it was a country club setting. The guards, remember, he hired. He paid for them, so their allegiance were to him. And he had it made, but he screwed up. He made that ego that he made a mistake, and that's what caused the government to come in and transfer him out to a real prison. That's where the firefight, and that's where the famous escape which Steve and I, like you said, were then part of that, the famous, I call it the search blog by the Colombian National Police. Yeah, but the person, and you know what? There's a story, and I get ribbed a lot that I slept in his bed, right? And it was a dare, and I'll tell you all, and it's in the book. It was pretty much a dare. The colonel in charge of the search was a good friend of mine, Colonel Orongo, and he like said, "Oh yeah, I bet you won't sleep." I said, "Yeah, I will." I mean, I changed the sheets, of course, right? But I just could not. But you know what, Nick? All through the night, man. And please, this is, I'm not trying to, but he had a religious picture of the Virgin Mary. It was in ceramic. I had never seen just that the photo. I mean, it was a ceramic, delicately made. You could tell worth tons of money, but over his bed. So I've always wondered, praying to the Virgin Mary and killing as many innocent people as possible. So that's will always stay in my mind. But anyway, so yeah, it was a country club setting. They called it the Cathedral, La Catedral. Then, like you said, you seen the pictures. He called them chalets. He had chalets built on the side of the prison where there were retreat houses, there were camouflage. And my question is, how did he build them? Man, it was like on the side of the mountain, so some of the best architects were up there building all his stuff. And we suspected it. We never knew what was going on. Remember, there was no flyovers, so there was no Colombia. Nobody could visit, so it was something we had never expected.
Well, you mentioned the soccer field, and I always soccer is my first love, I like to say, but my passion is the NFL. But even even the soccer team, Steve, whether it was the national team or even like the regular teams like Nacional from Medellin and America de Cali, how much drug money was in soccer during that time as well?
Well, these guys were the owners of the teams. Even Rodriguez Gacha, who was one of the original founders of the Medellin cartel, was owner of a soccer team there in Colombia. Um, my wife and I befriended a Colombian couple um, that actually his wife helped us adopt our first daughter.
Oh.
And he's a professional businessman and he came from a well-to-do family. He was educated in Germany. And the reason he went to Germany is because he wanted to become a professional soccer coach. So he comes back to Medellin after graduating, picks up an assistant coach position, and he's in Medellin working. And this was, long before '93 when Escobar was killed. And he saw Rodriguez Gotcha show up, and so he realized who the owner of the team was. And then later on, he saw Escobar at one of the games, and he said, he's an honest businessman. And that's the thing that these narcos down there, they bring such a bad reputation to Colombians because it's a beautiful country and Colombians are great, fantastic people. They're some of the most accepting people I've ever run into. But you've got this element of the narco traffickers plus the insurgent groups. Colombia has the distinction of having the longest running civil war in the history of the entire world. So you've got all these elements that bring this bad reputation to this country. But anyway, my friend, he got out of it and he started an eyeglass business just because he didn't want to be affiliated with, he knew what was going on. He didn't want anything to do with those people. And you know what? You get in bed with those people, and eventually when they ask you to do something and you don't do it, you're going to pay a price. So I think he was probably, in my opinion, one of the smartest businessmen I've ever met, just a smart person because he was smart enough to get away from those people.
Yeah, there was the famous story of, the Colombian soccer team from like 91 to 94 when the World Cup was in the United States. They were a dominant force. They were really, really good. And the goalkeeper for them, who has this like iconic video of him saving a ball, doing like a kick from behind. It's unbelievable. Steve, I'll send you a video afterwards. It's one of the craziest things. But Renee Iguita, I think.
Higuita.
Higuita, there you go. A very iconic player for them, long, like dreadlock hair. Also, he famously went and visited Pablo Escobar there, and then they left him off the national team. And then fast forward to them during the World Cup, they have the famous incident of the own goal with Andres Escobar, and then that leads to him coming back to Colombia, and then he's killed out on the streets. Was it? You mentioned the Wild Wild West before, Javier. Is that like the perfect analogy for what it was like during that era?
Yeah, yeah. The Wild Wild West, we put it because when Escobar traveled, he had bodyguards. He had 10 cars with him, about 40, 50 bodyguards with him. They'd go into restaurants, they would close them down, nobody in, nobody out. Then he would pick up the tab, give people money. You know what I'm saying? So it was ostentatious. You know, the paintings they were buying Monets, whatever, $1 million paintings. There was a lady in Medellin who, I don't know where she had the connections, but you know, all the traffickers used to go with her. So tons of paintings. You know, Steve talks about the famous painting in at the jail. You know, owned by Pablo Escobar. You had some Poteros and a Dolly painting there, but and it was just, you know, the money was, you know, the tons of money that they were getting. So soccer teams that were buying them. Yep, and I remember the Rene Guita. We found photos of him inside the prison where the soccer team would come in, and then the famous, they call it, remember in New York, the autogol, which you mentioned. The other Escobar, who was an innocent guy, goes back to Medellin, and I know the story. He's at a bar, and there's a trafficker who worked for Pablo Escobar. And there, it was just at a bar, and it was just, you know what, the trafficker, and we raided his ranch later on, found a lot of dope. But basically, it was, I lost a lot of money because of you, to the righteous, to the innocent Escobar, the soccer player.
Right, Andres Escobar.
Yep, Andres Escobar. And then all of a sudden it started into this, I started getting pissed and more pissed because of all the money he lost on that game. And I remember that game. In fact, Steve and I watched it at you know, in New York City, because we were there. Yeah, we were there for the trial of La Kika in New York City. That Danny Munoz was getting back to the soccer player. The trafficker ends up killing him because he is so mad at the money he lost. And the trafficker worked for Pablo Escobar. I'll always remember that. So it was just like they said, it was just a jealousy type. I lost money off of you. That's how they killed him. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was at a bar in around Medellin where the soccer player was killed. But that's the famous auto goal, which is famous in Colombia. Anybody who saw that game, we saw it. I'll always remember that. You know, made a goal by mistake, correct?
Yeah.
Yes, you're a soccer player, but yeah.
Steve, let me ask you a question here. This might be a curveball, but does that death of Andres Escobar happen if Pablo Escobar is still around?
Yeah, probably.
Probably.
I mean, the guy just, he has no conscience. He has no remorse. He has no sense of guilt feelings. His ego is completely out of control. It's all about power and Pablo. You know, the famous Hispanic machismo, which is typically more associated with Central Mexico and Central America. But, you know, I have no doubt that Pablo would have had him taken out. He might even had him brought to the prison and let him try to explain himself and then kill him. But this guy would just, yeah, that's just a way of life for him. You don't like it, you kill somebody.
Last couple of questions here. I keep eyeing the clock because I can speak to you gentlemen forever, but I do want to not keep you around for too long. I'm enamored with Miami. It's one of my favorite places to visit. And I've seen before pictures of South Florida from like the 60s and 70s. And then you look during the 80s and 90s, the evolution of the big condos and Ocean Drive and Collins Avenue. Steve, how much influence did the cartel of South America, Colombia, influence everything that you see in Miami now, as far as the structure and the building?
You know what, Miami, you can talk to native Miamians down there, and I'm with you. It's one of my, in fact, my wife and I say that's our favorite city in the United States. We loved living down there. We love the excitement, the glamour, the neon lights, all that stuff. I mean, we just really fell in love with Miami. We still love it down there. It's just, we're too old to handle that traffic now, but it is still our favorite city. But you talk to people from down there, and they'll tell you the city was built on narco dollars. When I got there in '87, if you seize money from somebody and you're a suspected drug trafficker, you could bring a drug dog in. And if he alerted to that money for the presence of cocaine, that was reasonable suspicion that we could go ahead and seize that money as drug proceeds. Well, it wasn't long after I got there in '87 that they stopped that, because they determined that every dollar bill down there, regardless of the denomination, that cocaine was so prevalent, all money in South Florida was drug tainted. It was just, you see the ostentatious buildings that are down there. And that's one of the things I love about it. But all of that was built on narco dollars. You hear the stories where people would go in and buy a Lamborghini or a Rolls Royce or whatever, whatever their car of choice is, their fancy car, and they bring in a brown paper bag with $100,000, $150,000, pay cash. Same thing when they would go buy yachts. And that's kind of what led to some of the IRS rules that were put into place. It got to the point where that's what led to the $10,000 limit. If there's more than $10,000 deposited, there has to be a cash transaction record made of that. But that's how crazy it was back then. You hear the older cops that I met down there that, have cut their bones in South Florida, and they talk about finding bales of cocaine and marijuana just wash up on the beaches. It's just, I'll tell you what, I was in the Bahamas one time, and I was flying patrol with the U.S. Coast Guard and the Bahamian National Police, and we saw what looked like a big bale. I'm a country boy. It looks like a bale of hay. So we were in one of the old Coast Guard Sikorskis, and they put me in the basket and lowered me down. Long story short, 72 kilos was in that bale. 72 kilos of cocaine had just washed up on the beach there in Freeport. We used to make a joke. If you were a cop in South Florida and you couldn't make a drug case, you needed to find another occupation because it was falling out of the skies.
Man, Javier, how much cocaine was being smuggled into the United States during that era?
Well, remember that Pablo was responsible for 80% of the cocaine that was reaching the world. We were estimating the shipments were about 2,500 kilos a daily basis being smuggled out. I remember seeing the clandestine airports. There'd be 5, 6 airplanes, all going either to Mexico, Central America, or into the South Florida area. So, like I said, it was a billion-dollar industry for Pablo Escobar, and like Steve said, the banking system was there was at that time there weren't a lot of rules. And if you've seen, I tell people you've seen the movie Scarface. Remember the banking, the bags of money? That's pretty accurate description of Miami back in the mid '80s when the cocaine people were out of control. I mean, it was just tons of money, but we would say we calculate 2,500 kilos on a daily basis. So that's why billions were coming back to Pablo Escobar in Medellin, Colombia.
Was it true that you and the DEA would find just planes abandoned because they would just like leave them in forests or on islands because of all the money they were bringing in, Steve?
Oh, absolutely. There are planes in the Bahamian waters down there that you can see below the surface. Some crashed on land, and that was just the cost of doing business. And you know what? Here's what's scary. You can go, there's a section of northern Guatemala right now that's used for drug trafficking. It's a very swampy area, so you can go there. The Colombians are still flying plane loads up there, and when they land and get the dope off, they just push the planes off to the side and set them on fire. So it's continuing. And, additionally, they're using the self-propelled semi-submersible and the self-propelled fully submersible submarines that are homemade. These guys, they've got a ton of money, They don't have a rule book like we have in law enforcement or the United States. And they'll come up with any method they can to smuggle cocaine. But, you know, planes can carry so much. That's what made them very attractive.
All right. Last question. I've always been fascinated by this. Javier, how do you go about finding an informant? I come up to you and because there was a lot of corruption there, politicians, police officers, people in the army. What's that vetting process like? Say I come up to you and I'm like, you know, I wanna rat out on Escobar and all these guys. How do you?
Yeah.
Is there a protocol to trusting me? Is it a gut feeling? Is it just a coin flip? Like, what's that like? Because I can't imagine that's an easy concept.
Yeah. You know what? It's all of the above. And the main thing, Nick, and I tell people, especially the young agents coming on with DEA, with informants, remember, they'll snitch for you, right?
Mm.
And they will snitch against you in a heartbeat. You got to corroborate that information. The basic rule of thumb is you corroborate them once you know that they're telling you the truth. Because you know there were informants that were sent by Pablo Escobar to give us false information to try to find out about them. Uh, the informants I used to love were the vendetta informants. You know what, Escobar killed my brother, killed my sister. I'm gonna snitch against him. They had something, in the game on it. But once you corroborate that information, and a lot of them at this time, the first thing they say, hey, you know what, Pablo Escobar is gonna eventually find out. He's gonna have me and my family killed. So as long as and there's a lot of ways, but I'm not going to get into, but protect the informant, protect his family or her family, then we would make a deal. And pretty much everyone wanted a new life. Obviously, they wanted to get out of Colombia. We protect a lot of people, but like I said, the main thing is corroboration. Once you find out they're telling you the truth, like I said, there'll be informants who, yeah, they'll give you 2 kilos here, and then they're going to be moving 1,000 kilos while you're doing, so it's a dirty game. And remember, the informant, the ones who are involved were crooks. They were in the business. I didn't tell them to get in the business, right? I mean, we obviously, you got to protect them, but then you know what? And if they got to testify in court, so be it. So very, very different. Yeah.
Steve, how about you? How did you go about it? Did you feel the same way?
Absolutely. And, you have to, and this goes right in line with what Javier just told you, is you have to determine what a person's motivation is for wanting to be a snitch. It's like he said, is it a vendetta against somebody? Is he trying to take out his competition? Is it a jealousy issue because, another trafficker is dating his girlfriend or whatever? Have they found religion? Are they just trying to make money? Are they working off a beef that they've been arrested on? And once you determine that motivation, that kind of gives you a direction on which way to go on how to cooperate. But you have to, you can't just take an informant's word on anything. You have to corroborate what he tells you. We used to, quite honestly, in Miami, if we weren't out doing surveillance on bad guys, we might go do surveillance on our informants just to see what they're up to during the daytime. And that all helps develop his reliability when it comes time to go to court. Because once you catch them in a lie, all their testimony is no longer valid. So they're not I've met informants that are very endearing. They can win you over with their friendship, but like Javier said, they will stab you in the back in a heartbeat. If they're running loads, just because they're working for you doesn't mean they've given up their criminal ways.
Right.
So if they're running a load and get caught that you don't know about, the first thing they're going to say is, hey, I work for Steve Murphy, or I work for Javier Pena. Of course, then, the police officers call you and they're where and they're doing what? So we give them a green light. Go ahead and arrest them because we knew nothing about it. So snitches are necessary evil within the law enforcement side of the drug world.
Did you guys ever hear about any bounties placed on you two in particular?
Yeah. Pablo put a $300,000 price tag on our heads.
Jeez.
You know, but I got to be honest with you, Nick, and it sounds horrible, but for me, the biggest threat I faced from that bounty is that my wife would kill me in my sleep because I was worth more dead than I was alive. She's a tough girl.
I can imagine if she wanted the action and being at ICUs and emergency rooms, like you said. I can't imagine her not being that
Well,
tough woman.
this is one of the things I really admired about when I first met her. I used to ride motorcycles as a young guy. She owned her own motorcycle. Now, how can you not love a woman that owns her own motorcycle, right?
For sure. Gentlemen, it's been an honor and a privilege. Javier, like you mentioned in the beginning, I say we start going with that, guys. The GOATs, the Mount Rushmore of DEA agents. I don't know if you've heard it before, but there's always talks about who's the greatest of all time in their craft. Yeah, listen, I'm giving you the cosign.
And Nick, I know you have a lot of fan base, and I just want to do a shout out for Colombia. It's a beautiful country. We encourage people to visit Medellin. It's one of the prettiest cities in the world. They call it the city of eternal spring. If you ever have a chance, it's safe. It's beautiful place to go visit. And like Steve said, and reiterate again, the real heroes in all of this, please, it's the Colombia National Police. Colonel Hugo Martinez, who recently passed away, he led the search block. So my hat's off, our hats off to them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if the other thing we'd say, Nick, is if people want to find out more about us, go to our website. It's www.deanarcos.com. There's everything on there from fan photos to a calendar, which right now is blank because the COVID has canceled all our events, but it'll show you when and where we'll be around the world. You can contact us through there. If you're interested in our book, you can order the book through there where you can get autographed and personalized copies. We have a professional do it. It's not a couple of retired cops trying to create a website. So it looks really good. So check us out.
Now, listen, you guys, I take you guys for both being humble. I like to disagree with that. I think you guys should be, you guys are the GOATs, right? So the book is fantastic. I'm going to get one, a nice little, got to think of a nice personalized message for yours truly. But Javier Pena, Steve Murphy, gentlemen, it was an absolute honor. Thank you for your time. And I'll make sure I have all the contacts on the episode for my audience to be able to find you too.
Okay.
Nick, thanks for having us on the show, man. It's been a pleasure.
Yep. Me too. Thank you, Nick. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.